Today, it was snowing heavily, and at the same time, someone was calling for help. A person wakes up to that voice rising from bed. The voice says it's in a lot of pain, and the child who woke up looks towards the direction of the voice. They wonder if it's coming from the window. With an undaunted gaze, the child steps outside, heading towards the voice. Looking at their hands, a magical bubble lands on them. Then they drift away. The child runs after them. The bubbles lead to an animal that looks like a cat. Approaching it, standing face to face, admiring the animal with a smile on their face. The animal seems to be getting ready to spit something out. Ketchup then comes out of its mouth. The boy extends his hands towards the cat, which accepts being held. Then the boy carries it in his arms, saying everything will be alright and it won't hurt anymore, while a voice tells him not to cry and to sleep well for good dreams. In a room, the supposed protagonist is waking up, complaining about the cold. Someone knocks on the door, calling out for Estio. It was his brother named Terriot who was furious with him. He berates him, saying if he wants to sleep so much, he might as well pass away. On the other hand, the boy remains silent, looking at the door. Then he gets up and opens the door with a forlorn look. Terriot calls him a sleepyhead, asking if he forgot what day it is. Estio looks at his brother's clothes and responds that he'll be right there. Terriot looks at him silently, then suddenly removes his blanket, revealing his clothes, and throws the blanket at him. He tells him to at least wash his clothes because he was smelling, while calling him a curse. Estio doesn't respond, just smells his clothes to see if they were that bad, looking out the window. He says today is the coming-of-age ceremony. It's an event held on the first Sunday of the year for those who turn 19. He goes downstairs looking at a girl who immediately screams because of his appearance, saying she thought he was a ghost, asking why he smells so bad. That's his sister Rosette, complaining about the bad smell and offending him, while their father says today is his ceremony day. However, they don't care since they know the boy's ways. Rosette scolds him, saying it's shameful to be seen with him since a certain Louis will be there today. Saying goodbye, she tells him they'll go ahead and instructs him to take a bath. Then Estio wonders where he will bathe, looking at a well outside. He looks at the well silently, then pulls the rope, throwing a bucket of water on himself, soaking everything around him, shaking his hair. He shivers from the cold. Suddenly, he hears a cat meowing and recognizes the cat named Suki. Suddenly, clothes fall on his face. Suki was that cat that appeared when he was a child. The protagonist asks the cat what it is, and it replies it's a gift. Looking at the clothes, he asks where it got them. Again, it replies it's a gift. Silently putting on the clothes, he looks at Suki and asks where it got them, and it just tells him it was given to them. Suki climbs down from the well, telling Estio it was given to him, and now he's giving it as a gift to him. Looking at him, who returns the gaze, the two stare at each other. Suddenly, he sees a girl about to be hit by a cart, and Suki jumps on her, saving her life. The girl's mother asks Suki what she can offer as thanks. Suki seems curious. The girl then hands the clothes to him. At that moment, the boy realizes and sighs, saying he bets the cat insisted they give it to him. Soon he pets it, praising it for saving the girl. He quickly puts on the clothes, which feel comfortable and cozy. Estio remembers that the cat always brings things he needs, and there's no way to know the frequency or reason. It does what it wants. A bird calls out to the boy, who recognizes it as Faria. At the same time, various animals start interacting with Estio. Something catches his attention. Looking back, he calls for Tsuki, while something unknown piques his curiosity. Then a person appears. The protagonist watches her, recognizing her as Bella, but unlike him, she doesn't recognize him, asking who he is. The smelly one says it was expected that she wouldn't remember him. However, she recognizes his voice and calls him by his name. She asks if he's also going to the ceremony, and the boy says yes. Bella then offers for them to go together. Elsewhere, a party is happening. It's a bustling restaurant with many people celebrating. Two people are also drinking, asking about the protagonist. Just hearing his name, two others are disappointed. The woman next to them responds that he's a lazy one and that she sent him to take a bath, but the boy is taking too long. Then someone suggests starting without him. The others agree. An elder prepares to speak, saying that since it's too cold to wait, they should start a toast. A blonde man asks them to wait, saying Bella hasn't arrived yet. Everyone agrees to wait as they can't start without a beautiful lady, until Bella arrives with the protagonist. The blonde-haired guy thought the girl wouldn't come, but she just says she had a delay. Then the guy gets worried, asking her if she fell and got hurt somewhere. She just replies that she's fine and that she met Estio on her way. He's confused, asking who that person is. Estio introduces himself, saying it's been a long time, calling him Louis. Louis responds awkwardly, questioning if he really is Estio. The protagonist shows no reaction. Bella watches this with a smile on her face. Suddenly, she grabs the boy's arm, and everyone around is surprised as she takes his arm, inviting him to go with her, looking at the protagonist, blushing. In a flashback, a girl is left behind by her mother. A gentleman says he likes Bella, and she smiles back, saying she likes him too. Another asks if they will marry after the coming-of-age ceremony, and she replies yes. Then a wave of voices calls her name, and she yells, saying she's tired of all this. She just wanted a love like in a soap opera. Bella calls for Estio, who seems overwhelmed by Bella's thoughts. While she asks if he's okay, approaching him, touching him, then he becomes terrified. and slaps her hand away. He quickly realizes what he did and apologizes to the girl. Bella is taken aback. She apologizes for touching him without permission. He replies that it wasn't for that. This leaves the girl confused, wondering why. Estio calms down, telling himself not to have seen anything. The party continues with people congratulating the children who have become adults. The protagonist, holding a glass, calls for Bella, thanking her for some reason. She replies it's nothing, and that if it weren't for him, she would be the butt of jokes for being late, but he accompanied her willingly, while the blonde-haired guy watches the two of them, calling Estio a scoundrel and wondering where he got that outfit. Then he goes outside. Suddenly, he hears someone asking if it was the person in front of them who bought that new outfit. He replies no, and the woman asks where Estio got it, and the man says he must have borrowed it. The woman says there's no one with that kind of outfit around there. The blonde-haired one listens to the whole conversation and looks malicious. Slamming his glass on the table, he calls for the boy, saying he's never seen the design of that outfit before and asks where he got it. Estio looks at him and replies that was a gift. The guy approaches while questioning if it really was a gift, already asking who gave it to him. Estio just replies it was from a friend. The blonde insists, asking who this friend is, since they must be rich enough to give that to him. The others watch the situation. He then demands the protagonist tell the truth, asking if he stole the outfit. Estio is incredulous at that question. A memory is triggered with several people appearing in it, with the younger protagonist bloodied on the ground, while the townspeople call him cursed for hearing those things. On the ground, nearly dying, he says no. A woman appears, asking not to kill him and takes him to a place, saying he will stay in the attic from now on. The protagonist then disperses from his thoughts, and the blonde-haired guy continues saying that he stole that outfit to look nice today. The people, hearing this, agree with him, calling Estio crazy. He becomes desperate, denying everything. Bella looks at him with a look of disgust, which he notices becoming desolate. A child throws a tomato while calling him a monster, and a voice tells him to dodge. Hearing this, he lowers his head, dodging. The tomato goes towards the lamp above him, hitting it and spilling the tomato on the boy. Stunned, he realizes the situation. People start calling him a monster. Cleaning his face, he looks forward, seeing his father, mother, and brother walking away without even looking at him. He thinks he kept hope, says there's no place for him there. Then he goes home and stays in the corner. Stat, he starts laughing madly out of nowhere. And some time after his madness passes, he starts crying, saying he's going to leave while picking up a weapon, and that no matter where he goes, he just wants to stay alive. Outside, he stops, wondering where he will go now. Covering his face, he continues on his way. A carriage stops in front of him with a voice asking if he's traveling on foot in this cold. Looking at the carriage, he sees an old man asking him to get in. Seeing this, he's surprised but then accepts. Inside the moving carriage, Estio observes a bridge. Looking up, something catches his attention. An animal is on top of the carriage, which is Suki. Seeing him, the protagonist with a smile on his face is happy, thinking that he left his hometown at the coming-of-age ceremony. The moving carriage suddenly stops abruptly, and with that, the protagonist wakes up. A voice then calls him interesting, which quickly makes him get up. The knight says he managed to sleep in this cold, laughing, asking why he's so surprised, already recognizing him as a country boy, calling him cute. Estio looks at the weapons behind him, wondering if he is the carriage guard. The knight says he's making him embarrassed for being such a quiet person, telling him to respond since they had a lot of trouble for letting him into the carriage, giving him a wink, leaving him speechless. Then the protagonist reveals his name to him, who doesn't understand the name right away and confuses it with Esto instead of Estio, which embarrasses the boy. The knight introduces himself as Lena. Lena Ranikander, asking if it isn't funny. The boy is confused, responding if it was supposed to be funny. Lena is surprised by the unexpected response while calling him by the wrong name and saying he liked him, again leaving him speechless, while Lena smiles, asking why Estio is going to the city looking for a job while saying he doesn't think he'll be lucky in the city. Hearing this, Estio says he hasn't thought that far ahead, as he has no goals and even less talent to protect himself, let alone others like him. Lena asks what he's good at. Looking at him, he doesn't seem to be good at lifting weights. Estio replies that he's good at dealing with animals. Lena says if he wants to try to join a circus, he better give up because he won't make it. The protagonist replies that's not it, and that he knows what animals think. Hearing this, Lena laughs, asking if he can read minds, at the same time asking the boy to read his too. Seeing Lena laugh, the protagonist concludes that there's no one else with his ability, and that the power to read the mind and thoughts of others, even seeing them unintentionally, is something a human shouldn't have, already remembering Bella's memories. And suddenly the carriage starts to shake, Lena becomes alert and stands up. Estio just looks at him as he exits the carriage, drawing his sword. In the carriage, Lena calls for the protagonist, who immediately goes to see what it is. Lena returns and says the horses aren't moving. Complaining, he's sad that they're tired. Time passes. Estio says it's been 3 hours. The others ask why they've been in that cold for so long and suggest killing the horses and getting a new carriage. Lena doesn't know what to do, saying he wishes he could read their minds. He thinks a bit about what he said and has an idea. Shouting the protagonist's name, he grabs him by the arm, saying they're ready to go. Estio then asks where to. Lena, holding his arm, says if he really can read minds, he should read the horses. Responding he doesn't know if it will work since he's not hearing them, Lena is confident with this idea and Estio gets a little angry. But the merchant starts yelling at the horses, telling them to move or they'll die. The protagonist sighs and heads towards the carriage, asking the merchant to wait because he'll take a look at the horses. Hearing this, the merchant is a bit confused, while Estio says it will only take a second. The merchant sighs and puts away his whip, and the protagonist approaches the horses that have a strange look. He approaches and touches the horse, asking what's wrong. Then he goes into the horse's thoughts, which replies that it's scared and that there's danger ahead. Estio asks what's scary and dangerous. The same replies that there's something big and sharp that will kill all those who took care of them, and a frightening beast is then revealed to the protagonist, who immediately returns to the real world scared. Lena, desperate, asks him what he heard. Then Estio points in a direction, saying there's a large monster with white fur and sharp claws. Lena thinks that if they're attacked, they'll suffer great losses. Sharing that information with everyone, the merchant doubts the situation and asks if they really should believe in something like that, leaving the protagonist desolate. Who is about to leave when Lena grabs him on his shoulder and says he knows a large creature on a snow-covered mountain, saying its name is Kamikwiya, a white-furred monkey. The merchant says it's hard to find rare species, but there might be one around here. Someone says that because it's cold, having a white monkey around isn't a surprise, and that it's enough to attract the attention of any hunter. The merchant says it's just a beast, and that's no reason for the horses to be so scared. Lena replies that it's reason enough for them to take a look since the horses won't move. He asks Estio to wait a bit, asking him to follow him since everyone is ready, saying they sent half of the hired personnel and that they're all very skilled. Looking at the protagonist, who is confused, he grabs him by the arm, saying they should go. Estio is confused, wondering why he's going along. Lena replies that you never know when you'll meet a translator, and Estio is shocked by his response, thinking that the monster is much worse than the white monkey, and that he didn't give details of his ability on purpose, so they must think he only understands the emotions of animals. The protagonist just looks at the man's back, and then Estio thinks that everyone who knows he can read minds changes their attitude towards him. He decided not to be interested in other people, even those who seem to trust him. The soldiers are heading towards the beast when someone yells for them to stop. Everyone stops and starts looking around. There's a strong wind and lightning around them. A soldier then uses a lantern spell, conjuring fireballs around them. While the protagonist is happy to see this for the first time, suddenly a strong wind blows from behind them, and a terrifying voice calls them cursed humans, warning that it will kill them all. Hearing this, the protagonist is in shock. To understand the feelings of a creature without touching it requires strong willpower. Estio freezes upon realizing they are in grave danger, and the monster continues repeating that it will kill them all. The protagonist tells Lena that they must return now. Lena asks what he's talking about since fighting is the only way. He asks if there's another monster besides that one, but Estio replies no. Lena draws his two weapons from his back, while the others prepare for battle. They wonder how it could be a monkey with white fur. The monster, hearing this, starts to scream, beating its chest, emitting a very strong shockwave. Estio struggles to stay on his feet, receiving that wave. Lena says it's not a monkey, but it does have white fur, and the girl asks if white fur is enough to consider it a monkey, while Lena moves towards the monster to attack it, which hits him with numerous blows. And stealthily, the mage conjures a fire power, launching it at the monster along with a bald man throwing an arrow at it. The protagonist is surprised by everything. However, the monster gets even more irritated and starts to scream, moving towards the bald man while Lena can only watch this happen. The monster strikes the bald man, making him fly and fall to the ground, about to be crushed by the monster. Estio runs in his direction, stopping in front of the monster, asking it to stop, while he tells it to calm down, that everything will be okay. The monster begins to calm down, staring intently at our bilingual animal hero. However, Lena couldn't wait and yells at the monster, saying he told it to be careful, attacking it suddenly from behind. The monkey screams desperately, while the others attack it non-stop. Overcome with despair, it starts to run, and the others go after it, saying they won't let it escape. Estio wonders why he did that and falls seated on the ground, questioning himself about his actions, but remembers that for a moment the monster stopped, and thinks that it could die because of this, until suddenly a wave of thoughts of something calling for its mother, saying it's scared, fills the boy's head. He recognizes that they are the thoughts of the monster and that he has to find it. He sees a cave with large steps. Observing it, he approaches it. Looking from outside, he says it's quiet and that probably the warriors didn't enter there. Entering the cave, he smells a strong scent of blood. As he gets closer, he sees the white-furred monkey with its back turned. Then he is pulled into the monkey's mind, which confronts him with a memory showing there were two other monkeys in the past. One of the monkeys finds something. It was a woman lying injured on the ground. Then he picks up the woman and takes her to his cave. The woman wakes up disoriented. The monkey, seeing that she woke up, offers her a piece of meat using a stone as a plate. Sometime later, the two of them had a child. Yes, that's right. All the monkeys were happy with that. And the woman named him Nejira for being beautiful and white as snow. But some human hunters appear, The woman then tells Nejira to hide, while she goes towards the humans who show disgust at seeing her. A shot is fired, taking the life of Nejira's mother in front of him. Then a hatred for humans swept his heart to this day. After the memory ends, the protagonist calls for Nejira, who asks if it's his mommy. Estio replies that it's not his mother, and Nejira then asks who he is. The boy just says his name. Nejira asks if Estio will also want to kill him, but this was not the boy's intention. This makes the monkey ask why he came to this place. He replies that he doesn't know, saying he just felt he needed to come there. Suddenly, Nejira becomes sad and says that humans killed his family. The monkey, not understanding, questions why humans killed his mother since she was also human. Estio says it might be because of money. Nejira says he doesn't know what money is, and the protagonist explains that it's something used by humans to get what they want. Then the monkey asks if with money he can bring his mother and family back. The protagonist replies no, that it's impossible. Nejira then asks if he can take revenge. The bilingual animal says that would be possible, but the monkey, realizing that he can only do that with money, bursts into tears. Estio just watches without saying anything. Drying his tears, Nejira says he's very nervous and really thought about killing everyone. But when the protagonist appeared, he didn't think about doing anything else. Estio says it's his own fault since he interfered with his emotions. Nejira is surprised and asks if he has such an ability, but Estio isn't sure. Suddenly, the monkey says he understands but doesn't care since he now feels much better. Hearing this, the bilingual is confused, and Nejira explains that if revenge can be achieved with money, he doesn't need it, while saying it's enough and turns to rest. Estio wishes him good dreams and soon turns to leave the cave. Outside the cave, he feels a great cold. Looking to the side, he sees Suki, who throws a bag on top of him, calling him annoying. He then descends to the ground. Estio says he's happy to see him, and Suki replies that he wouldn't be hurt by a boy so easily. The protagonist asks if he wants to be carried, but the cat replies no. Seeing Suki leaving, Estio asks where he's going. Who replies he's going to the carriage and says that as for Nejira, Estio should just leave him alone. While walking to the carriage, Estio tells Suki that he's in pain and will die if they find him. The cat asks if he intends to stay here even if he freezes to death. Hearing this, Estio is silent for a moment and says it's better to return to the cave, while Suki just agrees. The cat suddenly says he's smart, but he had no idea that the boy would abandon himself. Estio is confused, asking for explanations. Suki then replies that Estio thinks everyone will abandon him anyway, so he has no expectations. As he enters the cave, Suki says that anyway, it was annoying. The protagonist, going deeper, sees Nejira sleeping. Then he takes what's in the bag and wears it, revealing it to be that outfit that Suki gave at the beginning. He lies down in Nejira's fur and says it's cold, and that makes sense since he lives in a cold place. His temperature is. Barely finishing speaking, he falls asleep. Suki then appears, saying that he definitely told them they should return to the carriage, and that they should simply abandon the monkey. Looking at the two, he stops and a light emanates from his body, and suddenly a huge shadow emerges. Transforming into his original form, the cat says that him being sick is his own fault. Then he crouches down and lies next to him, and slowly his eyes close. The protagonist wakes up and stands up. Then he sees a memory of Suki, revealing him to be the result of an experiment. The people in charge call him number 1251 and say that he doesn't obey humans because his instincts are good, but it's useless if the experiment isn't submissive, so they order him to be killed. However, he manages to escape, and after being severely injured, he starts asking for help, saying he doesn't want to die. Transforming into a black cat, lying gravely injured on the ground, someone approaches him and holds him in their arms. This was Estio saying that the cat was very cute, thus naming him Suki. The one who was considered a failure gained a name. The cat then wakes up with Estio calling his name. He says that Suki finally woke up. The bilingual thanks him because thanks to Suki he could sleep without getting a cold. Suddenly the animal questions if he is injured. Estio is confused and replies that he is not injured. Suki just transforms back into a cat when Nejira appears looking at him. Suki seems not to like this and asks the protagonist how long he will take care of Nejira. Estio replies that he should be safe now and looks at the wounds on Nejira's back, saying that the wound seems to have also healed and that it's been a while, so there shouldn't be any group hunting him. Then he begins to say goodbye to Nejira, and suddenly he speaks the protagonist's name. Seeing this, Suki was surprised. Nejira asks to go along with them. Estio asks if he wants to follow them then. Nejira suddenly caresses the boy's head, implying that he would like to go along. Estio says he doesn't mind, but it could be dangerous because he doesn't have the strength to protect him. Nejira, all cute, says he can protect him since he is strong. Besides, there is no one in this place and he doesn't want to be alone. The protagonist tells him that where he is going there are many humans and asks if when he sees them he won't get angry. Nejira thinks for a moment and has an idea, saying to Estio that he will get angry if he sees the enemy who killed his family, but that you won't get angry with the other humans, saying that it was Estio himself who taught him that. However, the boy says that someone might try to kill him, which again leaves the monkey thoughtful. Then he says that in that case he can get angry. Suki looks at the protagonist and asks what he's going to do now, but he gets no answer. In the city of Galatia, Estio and Nejira look at it. The monkey comments that they arrived before dawn. Then he looks at Estio and asks if he is tired from the long walk. The bilingual thinks that Suki has gone away again. When a voice catches his attention, there are two guards saying that it is forbidden for medium-sized animals not to wear a collar. The guard also recognizes Nejura as a beast and that he can get into trouble, but he tells him to wait, saying that he seems to be from the countryside, while taking something from the other guard's hand. Handing a collar to Estio, the guard says it's illegal to be without a collar, telling him to remember that. The protagonist is silent, looking anguished at the collar. Nejura, noticing this, calls his name and says it's okay, asking him to use it. Estio is going to question, but Nejura interrupts him with a smile on his face, saying it's okay, and that it's not as if it's going to stop him if he wants to break it. Estio is reluctant, but he puts the collar around his neck. Nejura continues with a smile on his face, while the guards say that since he came to town without knowing anything, they will treat this as a service. Going away, they tell him to take good care of it and that it seems to be a useful thing. The protagonist looks at him, apologizing for making him be treated that way. Nejura replies that Estio is like his mother. She just kept saying she was sorry to him every day, and that at first he asked her why she was sorry since he was curious, but every time he asked, she didn't answer. But after hearing it so often, he understood that the sorry his mother said meant I love you. Then the two smile in the middle of that street. Estio then goes to the streets looking for a job, but everyone refuses him, and one even says that he is not suitable because he seems very weak. And it's also because Estio is carrying a beast around, advising the boy to go to the Ignis Guild and search him a job. He asks what the guild is. The guy replies that at Ignis they will have a suitable job for him and that it is in the city center. Estio and Nejura stop walking, while looking at the guild's location, commenting that it's not hard to find. The boy holds the doorknob and opens the door. A voice greets him cheerfully. The woman says that for questions about orders, the window to the right is where to go and tells him to take a waiting ticket. Estio says he heard they are hiring. She indicates where to apply and says if he can't read then. The protagonist interrupts her, saying he learned to read. Then he goes up the stairs. From a distance, someone watches him, expressing curiosity. The person approaches Estio, already asking who he is, while thinking if he is an applicant, saying that he is a complete country bumpkin. The protagonist replies that he is there because he heard they are recruiting new members. The person asks him if he knows what the guild does. He answers yes, and that they take orders and solve them. The man, a bit angrily, says he's not wrong, and introduces himself as Hawk, the manager of the Galazier branch of the Ignis Guild. The protagonist also introduces himself to him. Hawk then calls him to sit down, while saying that normally he would decide whether to interview or not after looking at the documents. But in this case, he wouldn't mind having a little monkey to help him. Nejura and Estio don't understand. Hawk asks him his hometown. The protagonist replies it's in the river region. Hawk tries to remember the name River, and asks Estio if he means that the entire river is his hometown, asking him to specify which part of river he is talking about. The boy just replies it's in Selbia, and Hawk seems to remember it. Asking Estio what his specialty is, and if it's dealing with animals, the protagonist replies it's more or less that. Hawk doesn't like it much and says he shouldn't use phrases like that from now on, and that he needs to know properly what the boy is good, so that he can find a suitable job for him. Estio replies that he can read the hearts of animals. Hearing this, Hawk is quite surprised, and thinks that the protagonist is an ability user, but he has never heard before of a power to read the hearts of animals. There are classes with various abilities that use mana or contracts with spirits. However, according to what Estio said, his ability is strange, not fitting into any class, and it's not with people, but with animals, and that's strange. The protagonist looks at him, waiting for an answer. Hawk apologizes for not realizing that Estio was an ability user, thinking that he has potential and maybe he should invest a little in him, giving an address to the protagonist saying that there will be an animal merchant there. Hawk explains that he is a collector with rare species and needs help, while he is very quiet listening. Hawk promises a guild coin from the merchant as a reward for successful work. Handing the address paper to Estio, he says that if he succeeds, he should return to the guild. Then he takes the paper from his hand. On the street, the protagonist is heading to the location with Nejura. Looking at the paper, he seems a bit lost, but Nejura senses something, pointing in a direction, and Estio thanks him. Neju is happy with a smile on his face. Towards the location, they see a cabin. Something catches the protagonist's attention, being two dogs that start growling at him. Estio just crouches down, and Nejura looks at them with a deadly gaze. The dogs tremble with fear. Neju and Estio are somewhat confused. Then the bilingual approaches and says they shouldn't be afraid because he won't attack them. Estio explains that they are only there to find the owner of that place, and one of the dogs asks if it's true. The protagonist then starts petting the black dog, and answers yes to the dog's question. One of them starts saying it's strange because suddenly he wasn't afraid anymore, asking who he was. The boy introduces himself, saying his name, and asks if Neju is a komiquia. But someone interrupts them. Nejura and the protagonist look at him. He tells the person that he was sent by the Ignis Guild. The man says the dogs were aggressive and didn't obey, implying that he might really have this strange ability, telling the protagonist to follow him. The two enter a tent and walk towards a cage. The man asks Estio if he knows why this animal keeps turned away like this. The bald man explains that the cub is from a rare and expensive crossbreed, but now is acting strangely, calling it cursed because it doesn't eat. But the protagonist, reading the man's mind, sees him showing concern for the animal. He stares at the man but quickly turns back to look at the animal. Estio says it's just a cub. The bald man gets irritated, saying the protagonist is just stating the obvious. Estio remains calm and doesn't respond. The man is surprised that he isn't intimidated, and also because the boy said the cub is in pain, but didn't say where. Estio is about to see his mind. Suddenly, everything starts to turn red, and the protagonist screams, feeling unbearable pain in his chest. Seeing this, the man asks what's happening, but Estio replies that it's not him who's feeling it. Distressed, he looks at the cub opening its eye, and says that's the pain of this Drakey. The man, sweating, becomes confused, asking what he's talking about. The protagonist finds himself in the animal's mind, and says he's seeing a memory of the animal. The bald man yells, asking if he died standing up and why he stopped talking out of nowhere. Estio replies that this child's heart is melting. Hearing this, the man is confused. The old man questions the situation while Estio replies that this species normally lives in cold waters, and if the man leaves it in these dirty lands, it will dry out and suffocate to death. He responds, yelling, calling him an idiot and questioning what Estio is saying, since Drakeys are desert monsters. Our protagonist very calmly says that its heart is made of ice and is melting. The man calls the bilingual crazy, asking what kind of animal needs an ice heart to live, but the animal appears to be suffering greatly. The man, looking at it, has a memory of when he said winter is coming and that he will prepare a desert-like environment to put the cub in. Then he leaves the cage towards the environment and the man is surprised. The adorable animal looks at him. The bald man sighs, calling the bilingual a cursed boy. Then the man grabs a shovel and throws it to Estio, looking at him confidently while the protagonist is confused. Seeing this, the man asks if he didn't understand and tells him to get snow from outside. The man insists that the protagonist is younger, so he should do this job, and if he's late, it will be the end for the problematic Drakey, while he picks it up in his hands, throwing it into a container with water. The cub shows rapid improvement after that. Seeing this, the man with a smile on his face is happy, but soon yells, asking Estio what he's waiting for. The boy immediately leaves there, running to get snow. Outside, Estio is gathering snow. The bald man tells him to dump what he gathers into the water tank. Estio asks if more is needed, but the man orders him to keep gathering until told otherwise. Estio continues to gather the snow and put it in the water box. The ice Drakey looks at the snow fascinated, while looking at the two adorably. It's explained that Drakeys are a rare species, and yet there are some ice variants that are not well known. The adorable cub smiles at the protagonist, but the bald man puts the shovel in front of him and says not to start relaxing. Hearing this, Estio is taken aback, and the man says it's not time to rest and tells him to follow him. They go to a horse and Estio says it has a thorn in its foot, asking to separate them because they are very territorial. The old man smiles and says the protagonist's ability is very good, and gives him a bag, telling him not to lose it. The two then say goodbye. Estio seems to be bothered by something and Nejira notices it. The voices of the animals echo in his head, and the protagonist says he can hear them clearly. Nejira then asks if he's tired and Estio replies it's nothing. On the way, he thinks about what will happen, already remembering people calling him cursed. He starts to tremble and crouches down. Neju, seeing this, becomes worried, asking if he's okay and if it's because of the cold. Suki then appears, calling for Estio, asking what he's doing because he doesn't seem to be injured. Suki tells him to get up because otherwise he'll get sick from being in the cold for too long. Estio just says thank you, and Suki asks for what? The protagonist replies it's for not avoiding him. Suki asks why he would avoid him. The bilingual replies it's because the cat doesn't like to be touched. Suki says it's obvious, and that he hates being touched by people. But Estio says that right now he was touching him. However, Suki interrupts him, saying he's talking about the bilingual being different from other people. And the Satan is surprised to hear this while Suki is walking away, saying that no matter what, he will never avoid him. Nejira then calls for Estio, saying it's that house from before. From the bag that the old man gave to Estio, Hawk takes out 2 coins and is surprised that the man gave not just 1 but 2. While thinking that the protagonist really is good at what he does, Hawk calls him and cheerfully welcomes him for being a member of Ignis, and that he will give him a guild identification badge and a uniform, telling him to wear it when making an order. He turns around and says he'll get them, already handing the clothes to Estio. Hawk explains that from the 3rd floor onwards are the guild's dormitories, and suggests he check it out if he has nowhere to go. Niju happily says it seems good, while the protagonist thinks that lying down that way seems nostalgic and some memories appear in his mind, saying that it's no different from before. Looking to the side, Estio asks if Nejira has already slept. The Sing replies no. The protagonist asks if he regrets it and Nejira responds what exactly. Estio says it's for having followed him, saying that he has a collar around his neck with his freedom restricted and people stare at him, and that it might be harder to move forward, while thinking that of course Neju would answer yes and considers releasing him in the mountains tomorrow. But Nenjira interrupts his thoughts, saying that he's happy to be able to follow him and that he was so relieved not to be alone. Instead of hating others, he can live while liking them. Hearing this, Estio falls silent and then thanks him. The protagonist learned to read on his own, so he didn't know the meanings of some words, but he understood one that he believes is the true meaning of bond. The next day, inside Agnes in a room, Estio is dressing in the guild's clothes. Going down the stairs, a voice calls him. Hawk says he didn't recognize him, and that the uniform suits him very well. A woman appears and asks Hawk who the protagonist is and if he's a new employee. Calling her Rosalie, he introduces Estio to her. Hawk explains that he joined the guild yesterday and will work in the support department, but it won't be magic or combat support. Rosalie is confused and questions since he is an ability user and won't be in either of those. Hawk replies that his ability is kind of special and therefore it has not yet been decided, so they will have to wait another day to get the answer. While picking up a cup, he asks Estio if he likes sweets. He doesn't know how to answer, so he does nothing. Then he takes one and Hawk says the protagonist knows how to have fun. Estio doesn't understand what Hawk meant. He comments that most people don't recognize the taste, but agrees that the ball-shaped sweet is the best, as he starts to show him how it's done and clearly the thing is sour. Rosalie asks Estio not to mind because he is always like that. He then looks at the sweet and puts it in his mouth. Hawk says he has a good feeling about this and that the bilingual will bring good luck to the guild. While chewing, he thinks that instead of being tasty, it just hurts. Swallowing the sweet, a voice asks him if that isn't incredible. It was Hawk saying that currently, they don't know to which department the protagonist will be assigned, so he asks him to help them with the work a little. Rosalie tells him to just go through the door. The bilingual enters a busy room with lots of paperwork. Rosalie asks if he saw a black rubber band because she's been looking for it for some time. Estio replies no, and she says it would be good to have one now. He replies that he understands, and the two are left in an awkward silence. Rosalie says that since he has nothing to do, she sends him to buy something. Rosalie offers the guild's stamp, instructing him to stamp the receipt instead of paying. It should be a black rubber band and a unicorn feather. Outside, Estio is quite reactionless after that, while Nenjira reminds him of the things to buy. Rosalie says they will find these things at the general store in that square, and the protagonist thanks her. Inside the store, someone is on a ladder doing something. Estio asks for permission, and the person seems to be looking for something, telling him to look for himself, and that she's a bit busy right now. The person seems to find it and reveals herself to be a girl with pink hair, while Happy Go found what she was looking for. Upon noticing the presence of our bilingual, she is surprised, asking if he is a customer and why he is still there. She, upon seeing Meiju, panics, screaming, calling him a monster. The girl then slits from the ladder. Opening her eyes, she realizes she was saved by the protagonist and thanks him. He tells her that it's not a monster and introduces him. She is embarrassed to hear this. In the arms of our bilingual, she apologizes and says she is afraid of animals, but it just seems to be the pet of a dear customer. Estio corrects her and says it's not a pet. Automatically, the girl apologizes. Then she asks if the name of his friend was Neju. Introducing herself with a smile on her face is Selly. Our bilingual very coldly asks for a black rubber band kit and a unicorn feather. After that, Selly is embarrassed and replies that she will fetch it. While he looks at the item she was trying so hard to find, Selly then asks for a second, which makes him turn his attention back to her. Then she puts everything he asked for in a bag and hands it to him. Suddenly, she remembers the item. Selly panics, searching every corner, and Estio points in the direction where she dropped it. Selly thanks him and is happy that she managed to find the item. The protagonist is about to leave when she asks his name. He turns around and introduces himself to her. Selly approaches and asks if he doesn't mind using that item before he goes. Estio asks what it is about. She explains it's a new product that she risked a lot to get since it's a ball that can read your heart. The protagonist asks if she refers to emotions. She confirms, saying yes, it can be seen in the form of colors and questions if that isn't romantic. He then turns around and says he doesn't need it, and she doesn't believe it and asks why. The boy says he doesn't have anyone who wants to see someone else's heart, and that the ability to read other people's minds is the most useless in the world. Hearing this, she's a little surprised, saying that it even seems like he has that power, while she looks at the item in her hand. Leaving with Meiju, he arrives at the Ignis Guild and Rosalie starts guiding him in the work. The next morning, Hawk calls for the boy, saying that as he thought, now he is part of the special support department, and hands him a paper asking him to read it. On the paper is written a request from a child saying that her puppy doesn't listen to her. Estio seems a bit disappointed with that. Hawk explains that in the support department they deal with requests since it's not necessary to have combat skills or experience, because the main requesters are members of the nobility. Our bilingual talks about the detail of the requests, and Hawk replies that it seems a bit vague. It's also possible to bribe him with a gold coin, and in this way it's possible to avoid the guild member's cancellation request. The protagonist wonders if it's normal for the level of request to be so low. Hawk warns that it's difficult to please the nobles, and that if they don't like it, they can end your life. As Estio says he will remember that, Hawk tells him not to be deceived by the girl's appearance, wishing him good luck and offering that sweet, thinking that maybe his first request for a dog will work out. The protagonist reaches out to take the sweet and eats it, saying the taste is still the same. In front of the mansion, Neju and Estio are found. Then they approach the guards and say they come through a request from the Ignis Guild, and the guard asks for the request form. The guards quickly look at it and ask them to follow. Inside the mansion, a noise echoes through his mind. He thinks that compared to other dogs, this sound is different. Then Hiru appears. The dog starts questioning him about why he came there and tells him to disappear. The girl who made the request calls for the dog and runs towards him. About to touch him, Hiru starts barking. The girl becomes sad seeing her dog act that way. The protagonist just watches and says he is from Ignis to her. Looking up, the girl asks if he really is from the Ignis Guild, and Estio replies yes. In her thoughts, she thought an old and muscular man would come and wonders how a weakling like the protagonist works in the guild. Then she asks his age as she stands up. Estio replies that he turns 17 this year, and the girl seems to like hearing that. But suddenly the dog starts barking, looking scary. Neju just stares at him with that deadly gaze, and in an instant Hiru quiets down. The girl is fascinated by the monkey and talks about his size. The protagonist introduces Neju to her. The monkey looks at her adorably, which immediately charms her. She then approaches and introduces herself as Saralyn, but everyone calls her Sarah. However, the maids pull her away, saying it's very dangerous since white-furred monkeys are the beast among beasts, and tell her to only look at him from afar. Saralyn doesn't like it but just obeys. Then she looks at our bilingual, who doesn't understand, and asks her what she is doing. Saralyn says she heard he can read the hearts of animals, and she orders him to find out why her dog is so hostile immediately. Our bilingual looks at the dog and sees that he is scared because of Neju. Realizing this, Estio asks him to step back a little. Opening his eyes, Hiru sees the protagonist in front of him as he slowly approaches. The two stare at each other, and Estio stretches out his hand towards him, saying he needs to touch him, because the ability will be amplified. He then takes off his glove and tells Hiru it will be alright, and that he won't hurt him while the dog remains silent. Then he approaches and rests his head on the hand of our bilingual. After touching him, he manages to enter Hiru's mind. A dark memory is shown with a voice commanding obedience, saying it doesn't care about the mother and just orders to get rid of her. Then someone takes Hiru's mother and he becomes desperate, asking where she's going, begging her not to leave him behind while the mother is being carried away. Someone stands in front of him while saying that small size is the trend among nobles and that he needs to be small to be sold for a high price, ordering to feed him enough so that he doesn't die. The mysterious person asks if he is Viscount Fabine and asks him to wait a second, because he will wash him and bring him in an instant. In a container, they are drowning him while Hiru begs for salvation, saying that the world is a cold and scary place, and that humans took his mother and made him suffer. Suddenly, a voice calls for Saralyn, giving Hiru as a birthday present, telling her to take good care of him, and she thanks. Taking him from the basket, she spins him around, calling him cute, while calling him a precious little angel. But Hiru remembers the humans mistreating him and suddenly bites Saralyn. Her father kicks the dog, telling her to get rid of him while she begs him not to do that, because she will take good care of him. The father says that a dog that bites its owner is just a wild beast and asks her how she will raise him, and tells her to make a request to the guild, and if even that doesn't solve it, he will get rid of him himself. The protagonist is speechless after seeing all this. Saralyn then asks what he found and if Hiru doesn't like something. Estio replies everything and the girl doesn't understand. The protagonist says that Hiru is afraid of all the affection she is giving him, and that this puppy thinks that they never gave him love, because people will one day kill him like they killed his mother. Hearing this, Saralyn starts to become distressed, saying that she is the person who likes Hiru the most, and that if she had the ability to read hearts, she would have treated him better. But Estio says that just reading the heart isn't everything, explaining that Hiru's mother was killed by humans and he was forced to starve to increase his value, and the protagonist asks if she ever thought about how to calm his fears. Saralyn is incredulous that his mother is dead, and Estio explains that she was old and could no longer have puppies, so they considered her useless and killed her. Saralyn says she didn't know and starts to cry. She asks what she should do since she didn't know any of this. Estio sees in her mind that she only had good intentions for Hiru. The protagonist then begins to activate his ability. The protagonist puts Saralyn's mind inside Hiru's, and she doesn't understand at first. Hiru says it's kind of confusing but asks if she really loves him, and says that she wasn't bothering or hating him. She then replies yes and asks if she can hug him. Hiru says yes. She raises her hand and carries him in her arms for the first time. Caressing his head, the two have an incredible moment of great happiness. The two then return to the real world. Estio just watches them. The girl thanks him, saying that the Ignis Guild is incredible, and that even though she made the request, she wouldn't have known such an ability existed, and all this time she knew nothing about Hiru and that she was wrong all along. Saralyn says that the dog had been telling her everything all this time. Our bilingual replies that she wasn't wrong, and that the culprits of the story are those who sold Hiru, and the girl looks at him admiringly. Estio explains that Hiru just misunderstood her intentions because it was different from what he was used to. Hearing this, Saralyn is happy with a smile on her face. She then gives a guild coin to our bilingual, asking him to keep it safe and be careful on the way. A voice then says that he has an incredible ability. The voice was Viscount Fabien, Sarahlin's father, and she runs towards him when she sees him. The protagonist remains unresponsive as usual. The Viscount says he wasn't trying to spy on her, and that he was just coming home, but they could hear her crying from afar. He says this while one of his sons stares at Estio, and he stares back. Saralyn, embarrassed, says she didn't cry that loud. The Viscount says that unfortunately for her, her older brother Jeremian also heard. Fabien says he's talking too much since they have a visitor at the moment. Patting Saralyn, he asks the protagonist if he came from the Ignis Guild. He replies yes and introduces himself as being from the Special Support Department. For some reason, Vince Goad is not very happy hearing this, and says that from his observations, the ability Estio used was quite unusual, asking him what kind of ability it is exactly. Our bilingual replies it's the ability to read the hearts of animals. Fabien asks if it's only animals, and Estio replies yes, but the Viscount doesn't like that answer and calls him reckless, and he asks if he doesn't know what happens if he lies in front of a noble. The protagonist panics, thinking he was careless, while Fabien says he's interested in what he considers an animal, asking what the limit is, whether it's feelings or the soul, and even about hybrids like monsters and humans. Approaching, he says that if the protagonist can't answer that, his ability would be nothing more than reading hearts. Saralyn and Jeremian appear surprised by everything. The Viscount is leaving when a thought from Jeremian says that if Estio really can read minds, he is a monster, making the protagonist anguished to hear that. Fabien then says that reading the hearts of others is a fascinating ability, and that he has met various ability users and many stories, but none were as special as his. While he asks if he understood what the term special suggests, the Viscount asks Estio if he understands what he's talking about. The protagonist then panics, imagining what this man might do. The Viscount says that our bilingual has a job that only he can do in this world. He was going to respond to something when he lets go of his shoulder, and says he will send a request to the guild soon as he leaves. Our bilingual looks back, and Saralyn is coming towards him. Stopping in front of him, she's about to say something. Saralyn asks what his name is. The protagonist introduces himself again, and she says she almost sent him away without knowing his name. But anyway, she thanks him and says she will call him next time. Jeremian walks towards the two and stands in front of Saralyn, asking the protagonist if his ability has no limits. He replies that he can't read everything and tells him not to worry. Jeremian asks if he's telling the truth, because if he's saying that, it's because he's going to read everything. Pushing him, he tells him to leave. Losing his patience, he yells again for him to leave the house. Saralyn then starts crying, saying that Estio is her guest since he helped Hiru. Jeremian says the bastard is dangerous and asks her to listen to him, but she just screams that she hates him. However, the Viscount behind the door hears everything. Outside the mansion, Estio is looking at the sky while thinking about what he was called, gripping his gloves tightly. He was lost in thought. Neju watches him. Then they walk back to the guild, and on the way, the protagonist starts looking at the coin. Niju then says that humans are strange, and Estio doesn't understand what he means. The monkey explains that he is happy when our bilingual reads his heart because he knows his thoughts without having to say anything. The protagonist replies that this is probably the reason why they hate him. Niju says that's why humans are strange, and that Estio is not someone scary, but rather the most considerate of others. Niju says what's scary is not him, but the thoughts that humans hide. Our bilingual stretches out his hand towards him, and says that anyone who gets angry with him also gets scared or thinks he's a monster. But Estio says he doesn't care about any of that, and that compared to when he was locked in the attic, now he feels truly alive. A few days later, our bilingual is getting ready, already putting on his uniform. He walks to the window and looks at the view. Going down the stairs, a voice shouts at him. Hawk and Rosalie suddenly start applauding him. Then Hawk explains that the protagonist did a good job and caught the attention of the Vince Goad from before. Rosalie says that nobles like special things, and since Estio has a special ability, it was expected. However, this was faster than she expected. Already congratulating him with a big smile on her face, our bilingual remains unresponsive, knowing what that Viscount might have planned. Estio picks up the letter left by him. Opening the envelope, the information is then read. It states that the Jefferson Company, which holds most of the gem trade in the city, is closing for some reason, causing difficulties in the jewelry business. Ordering the protagonist to look for the head of the company and find out the reason. And that due to the resolution of the first request, a guild coin will be delivered. But if the second request is completed, an additional 3 coins will be added. Estio seems uncomfortable with this, but he calls Meiju, telling them to go. He smiles, saying he'll be right back. Outside, our bilingual wonders what to do when Neju calls his name and asks which way they should go. Estio replies that they just follow the main street, and that it's from the guild to the southern tip, and Meiju asks if it's far. The protagonist replies it's an hour's walk. Neju thinks of something and calls him, and asks if he should carry him. Neju says he runs very fast, and if our bilingual walks for too long, he will get tired. Estio says no and that he will be fine, but Neju is a little disappointed. In his thoughts, he says he just wanted to help but isn't good enough. The protagonist, hearing this, asks if he should accept. Automatically, Neju is happy, already crouching down for him to get on. Estio gets on and says he's in his care now, and suddenly, they start running at high speed. Neju is happy and proud, saying he's very fast. And our bilingual agrees that it was a very good run. Looking at a place, he gets off Neju. While the two see a shelf with various jewels, and Estio says it's like the shiny stone, and he doesn't understand why people go so crazy for it. Knocking on a door, he asks if anyone is home, but there is no response. Neju asks what they will do now, and the protagonist replies that the head of the company lives in that building, so he must not have gone anywhere. But he's not sure since there's a possibility he left there. Neju is confused, and Estio then sits down. Seeing that it might take a while for the door to be answered, Estio sits in front of it. Worried, Neju asks if he isn't cold and if he will continue waiting. Confirming, he says he is fine. He pats Neju's head. The sun is already set, giving way to a cold night. His face looks terrible from waiting outside for so long. He and Neju kept warming each other up. Suddenly, the door opens and the man speaks to Estio, shouting that he's crazy for waiting so long in this cold. He thought Estio would give up and go back to where he came from. Estio asks if he is Thompson, the head of the Jefferson Company. Arrogantly, he tells Estio to leave, thinking he is sent by some noble. He was about to go back inside, but stops before doing so, saying it's the first time he's seen someone like Estio. You could tell that he was suffering from hypothermia, just by looking at his face. Estio's hand was trembling involuntarily. Concerned, Thompson asks if he isn't trying to kill himself. Not wanting the front of his house to become a suicide spot, he tells Estio to go to a lake 2 blocks away, because it was warm and a better place to die. Estio says he is not trying to kill himself, making Thompson curious. He abruptly grabs Estio's hand. Neju thinks it's some dangerous action, so she runs to hold on to Estio. Thompson shouts at her for being dangerous by grabbing others suddenly like she did. Then Estio starts recalling information about Thompson. He had a beautiful wife named Teal. Having fallen in love at first sight with her when she agreed to marry him, it seemed like a dream come true. However, after their marriage, only painful things awaited Teal. Their first child died on their first anniversary, and then the second and third were a cycle of pregnancies and miscarriages. Leah was the name of their daughter. She cried energetically. With the baby in his arms, Thompson said that this child was born healthy, but Teal said she would die soon. These words silenced Thompson and left a bitter taste in his mouth. Under extreme stress and depression, Teal did not care for her daughter even after her first birthday, and soon cracks began to appear in their marriage. Kneeling on the ground in front of his wife, Thompson questions what she wants him to do. Crying, he asks if she will let their daughter die too, but he received no response. After Thompson closed his company, he gave his all to take care of his young daughter. Thompson asks why he is walking around with a creature like Neju. Then Estio speaks to Thompson and tells him that if his wife doesn't want to talk, he just has to ignore her. This phrase left him incredulous and scared. He couldn't find the words to finish his sentence. Estio advises Thompson, saying that if someone doesn't want to understand the truth, they won't listen even if you force it on them. He had discovered the reason why the Jefferson Company had closed, but at this rate, something bad could happen. Thompson grabs Estio by the collar with both hands and throws him inside the house with Neju. He locks the doors with a piece of wood, then turns and walks slowly towards him. Threatening Estio, he asks who he is and how he knows his wife. Thompson's house fell silent. Once again, he asks how he knows his wife. Estio introduces himself as a member of the Ignis Guild. Annoyed with the nobles, Thompson thinks they made a request for the guild to investigate him. But looking at Estio, he thinks he might be the worst member of their guild. Estio asks if Neju is okay. Sighing, Thompson says the nobles are blind with greed for jewels. Apologizing, he offers his hand to help Estio up. He confirms he is the head of the Jefferson Company. Estio looks at him expressionlessly and gets up from the ground on his own. Timidly, Thompson asks what request he accepted to come to his door. Estio remains quiet for a moment but decides to speak. He explains that his request was to help him reopen his doors. Crossing his arms, Thompson says the nobles are becoming increasingly impatient. He walks a bit around the house but stops, and he turns asking if his name was Estia, and asks him to wait a moment. Seeing that he got his name wrong, Estio corrects him and follows him. They went to the dining room. Thompson lights the candle on the table and asks if Estio would like a drink to apologize. He supposes that young people like Estio prefer sweet drinks like tequila with fruit or things of the same kind. Then he grabs a bottle of wine from the table and drinks from the bottle. After quenching his thirst, he speaks to Estio and says he seems to lack manners. In situations like this, he should ask for a drink to match the mood and progress with his mission, but Thompson realizes that Estio doesn't need his friendship. Hesitant, Estio says it's true. Thompson says he mentioned his wife when he least expected it, and advises him not to talk about people's personal lives like that, saying he needs context before speaking to others. Stating the mistake he made, Estio apologizes to Thompson for the way he acted. Then he asks why the guild sent him. After saying he has no intention of returning to business, Estio says, so that's it. Seeing him being so passive, Thompson feels apprehensive. He asks if Estio isn't going to ask his reason. Following what Thompson said, Estio asks why he doesn't want to return to business. Thompson sees that he isn't even interested in him. he offers him a drink again. Estio remembers the previous advice, and this time he accepts the offer. Thompson notices what Estio is doing. Suddenly, he starts to laugh and says he's a funny guy, leaving Estio a bit confused. Thompson begins to say that he loves his wife and daughter more than anything and wouldn't trade them for anything. He hands a drink to Estio. Continuing the story, he says that years ago, his wife's condition worsened and the death of their first child made her never smile again. Slowly, she stopped talking, and after giving birth to Leah, she never left the room. Once he tried to force her out of the room, but she bit her own tongue. But fortunately, she didn't die. Thompson drinks a glass before continuing and says his wife prefers to die than to meet their daughter. After telling his story, Thompson uses his hands to cover his eyes and starts to cry for his wife. Neju watches Thompson's deplorable situation with a sad face. Estio listens attentively to him crying without disturbing him and realizes that unintentionally his ability activated on its own. Thompson stops crying and says he only came to see Estio after putting his daughter to sleep and feels the story flowed. Feeling he made Estio fail his first request, he apologizes and says that at least for this year, he doesn't intend to reopen his business and tells them to look for other product companies. Thompson walks past Estio, but he decides to ask him a sensitive question. Estio asks if he will reopen his company if his wife's condition improves. This makes him hesitate and he stops walking. Estio says there is a chance he can help him. Thompson turns to look at Estio behind him. As the two look into each other's eyes, Estio says he can complete this mission. He begins to remember the job they said only he could do in this world. Clenching his hand to gather courage, Estio says he can make his wife leave her room. Disbelieving, Thompson asks if he can really make his wife leave the room and asks how he will manage to do that. Estio opens his mouth to speak, but he extends his arm towards Thompson. Neju realizes what he's going to do. Estio places 2 fingers on his forehead. Not understanding, Thompson does nothing to interrupt. Estio concentrates to use his ability, and Estio's voice speaks in Thompson's head, saying this is the ability he has. His cold eyes stare at his reaction. Not understanding what just happened, Thompson is slightly scared. He swats away Estio's hand. Again, he hears a voice asking him not to be afraid. Thompson looks at Estio and begins to understand the kind of ability he possesses. He turns his gaze to Neju. She asks him to believe that Estio is not a bad person, with a pleading look on her face. Thompson begins to feel bad about what he heard, and he falls on his back to the ground. Looking at Neju, he stammers, saying the voice in his head was hers. During the fall, he spilled the wine he was holding on the ground. Estio looks at Thompson with a thoughtful expression. He raises his hand to help him up, and asks if he will let him help his wife. Speechless, Thompson looks at Estio and Neju in silence, but he raises his hand to him, and confidently holds his hand. The two climb the stairs of the house. The upstairs hallway is silent. Stopping in front of his wife's bedroom door, Estio and Neju followed right behind him. Thompson knocks a few times on the door and tells his wife that they have a guest, but no one answers the door. He places his hand on the doorknob to open it, and they enter the room. The curtains move with the wind from the open window. Teal is sitting in a rocking chair by the window. She only had a dead fish look and a sad face. Estio recognizes it as a vacant expression. Thompson goes to the window and closes it, asking if Teal isn't cold. Turning to look at her, her weak hand was resting on the chair. Taking her hand, he feels that they are freezing. Seeing his approach, Thompson looks in his direction. Estio asks for permission to start the treatment. Thompson nods, giving his permission, raising his hand slowly to Teal's head, taking the utmost care not to hurt someone as fragile as her. Concentrating on his power, Estio closes his eyes. Feeling that her mind is excessively silent, he decides to go deeper into her head. He begins to feel apprehensive because he has never had to adjust his strength before. Estio starts to remember the past. When he was younger and looked at other richer people, he realizes it's the first time he will use his power this way. The tips of his fingers begin to emanate a spiral energy. The mind's strength begins to expand strongly. Estio feels a disturbance in the force. The interference in the physical world reaches the air and a blinding light appears. Then a dark, swirling aura spreads through the room. Thompson shields his face from the blinding light. Slowly, he opens his tearful eyes and watches a new scene unfold before his eyes. The dark mist begins to rise and the three find themselves in a forest. They look ahead, seeing what is around. A fallen bucket with spilled wheat. The axe stuck in the log and chopped firewood. Estio feels a different vibration coming from behind. Thompson notices his movement of turning around. Behind them, there is a house. A woman steps out the door to work on this hot day. The three were surprised by who they saw. Teal was leaving the house. Desperately shouting for her, Thompson was the most surprised person. He says she looks like she did in the past. Teal doesn't seem to have reacted to his voice and continues walking through them. Estio says it wasn't his intention, but they were inside her memories. Humming, Teal heads to work. She wonders if she should go to the lake with Juan and relax instead of working. Teal was the daughter of a poor farmer. Her mother died before she could remember, and her father died after she had grown a bit. The only ones left were her 2 younger sisters who needed her. Teal single-handedly supported her 2 sisters. She worked in the garden every morning. sub toys for them on their birthdays, made crafts like pearl necklaces and others. One day, while she was working in the garden, the two sisters brought branches for firewood and edible grass to eat. Teal stands up to praise her lovely little sisters. One of them gives her a white flower she found. The youngest asks her to crouch down to put the flower in her hair. These were some of Teal's best memories. Then she fell in love with a guy named Juan. He was also a farmer. Turning around cheerfully, he sees Teal walking towards him. They both talk about their days. The moments they shared together were precious. But poverty grabbed their hopes and threw them into the mud. With only 5 coins in hand, even having increased her workload, Teal was saddened that it wasn't enough to buy food and medicine for her sisters. Her sister calls her, saying she heard that Juan proposed to her. Teal responds that she has no intention of marrying yet and tells her she has already rejected him 3 times. And because of that, they decided to break up, wanting to make it clear to him that she has no intention of marrying before it's too late. And so Teal and Juan went their separate ways. In a city larger than the village in the forest, Teal runs to make a delivery, still having 5 more deliveries to finish by the end of the day. She thought about skipping lunch to finish before the end of the day. Maybe then she could support her family until the end of the month. Suddenly a man falls, dropping boxes on the ground. Seeing this, Teal decided that helping him was more important, running to check his condition. That man was Thompson, and he was very sick. Seeing these memories, he remembers that this is the first time he saw Teal. She saved him that day, and took care of him until he woke up. Slowly opening his eyes as he woke up, he is startled by the person in front of him. In his eyes, she was the most beautiful and kind woman he had ever met. A time jump shows them the moment when Thompson proposed to her. He had bought a very expensive ruby ring. One day, Juan ran to her in the forest. He said he heard about her marriage. Seeing the ring on her hand, his world collapsed. He shouts that he can't bear it if she abandons him. Taking a vial from his pocket, Teal is frightened by the idea of him doing this because of her. Continuing the threat, he says he can't imagine living a life without her, and keeps begging Teal to come back with him. Her expression of fear is horrendous. She tells him to do what he wants because she won't go back with him. Turning to leave, she says she has no more connection with him. Confused to see his threat not working, he tries to go after her, but Teal pays him no more attention. She says she hopes he finds a good girl and is happy with her. Unwilling to accept the rejection, he takes the poison. Hearing the sound of swallowing, Teal is startled. She quickly turns to see Juan. He had fainted after drinking the poison. Thompson and Estio saw the scene of Juan drinking the poison. He had no idea that another man loved his wife. Estio says she didn't want him to know because she felt cursed by Juan. Thompson clenches his hand tightly, and in the end he realizes that the reason his wife married him was for money. Estio says that it might be true because she rejected the poor farmer and chose the man who gave her an expensive jewel. He asks if his decision would change if she really chose him for that reason. Confused, Thompson looks at him sideways. Estio asks if her decisions were influenced by money and poverty. Would he exclude his wife from the 2 most precious people in his world? Answering no, he also adds that his wife is the most precious to him. He asks what has changed then. Thompson says nothing has changed. Teal is still his precious wife, but thinking about the fact that she is still trapped in this memory, it irritates him that she gave up the chance to have had a happy life. Tearing up, Thompson thinks that Teal won't feel anything even if their daughter dies. And the memory of his daughter's birth is the next to follow, from Thompson asking her to hold her in her arms at least once. Estio says it's not that she won't feel anything, but that she is already suffering. Thompson, confused, asks what he means. Returning to the real world, he explains that his wife thinks that losing her children in the same way every time is a way to atone for her own sins. Thompson is in disbelief hearing this logic, but he remains silent, seeing that it was his wife's choice. Slowly approaching his wife, he kneels and says it's not her fault. Holding her hand, he says that their daughter will live well in the future, that she won't die, and will be waiting for her. And Thompson asks her to stop blaming herself and come back to them. She has no reason to hurt herself, and he wishes to bear the same wounds as she does. Still with her vacant face, Thompson doesn't stop talking to Teal. He repeats the same phrase, saying that if anything happens, they can both be hurt together. Suddenly, the window glass shatters. Thompson immediately protects Teal from the glass shards. He sees that his wife has finally returned with her original expression. His face fills with joy. But Leia's loud crying interrupts this moment. Teal gets up to go see her daughter, rushing to her room, going downstairs to see her. Taking her daughter from her crib, Teal apologizes to her daughter for not being close to her when she was born. Thompson places his hand on her shoulder. From the sound of her daughter crying, he recognizes that she is hungry and hands her a bottle. Feeding their daughter, he asks if Teal is also hungry. Finally, they had become a true family. Estio leaned against the wall in the hallway, but his arm lacked strength, and he fell to the floor, startling everyone. In this quiet city, there weren't many people who could help. Thompson ran through the city to the doctor. Half asleep, the doctor walked to answer the door. Upon opening the door, he was surprised. Thompson was carrying Estio in his arms, accompanied by Teal and Meiju. Estio was placed in a hospital bed. A lamp was placed in front of him. The doctor opened his eye to see his reaction. After examining him thoroughly, the doctor thought for a moment. He asked if Estio was an ability user. Thompson replied that he was, and that he ended up like this after using his ability to help his wife. Given this, the doctor said it was a problem with his ability and beyond his expertise. Estio's fever rose higher. With the doctor unable to treat him, Thompson asked where they should go. The doctor responded that there weren't many medical facilities in Galatia that could treat him. His diagnosis was that using the ability had made him like this. In most cases, resting enough is sufficient. They would observe until tomorrow, but depending on the situation, they might need to ask for help from the affiliated guild. Thompson sighed in relief and Teal touched his shoulder. Turning his head out of curiosity, he saw Neju beside the bed, worriedly looking at Estio. The two exchanged glances and thought for a moment. Coughing, he cleared his throat before speaking. Neju held Estio's hand on the bed. They remembered how Neju had appeared in their daughter's room saying that Estio was hurt. The two were shocked to see that she knew how to speak the human language. Concerned, he looked at her. Crying with worry, Neju continued to stay by his side. Thompson said that since Leo was at home, the two of them would go back first and would cover his costs so they could contact him if they needed anything. Hearing this, Neju calmed down. She asked about the guild's request that Estio had to complete. Looking at his wife, Thompson thought. Teal looked back with a smile on her face. He said that for his benefactor, he would reopen his business to cover his mission. Thanking him, Major nodded. Thompson and Teal left to return home. In the hospital, there were wheelchairs. On a table, there were already medical devices. Neju spoke to the sleeping Estio, saying that he had managed to fulfill the request. The human he helped had returned to normal as well. She sat on the floor near the bed. Resting her head on her knees, she made a wish that he would wake up and return home together with Neju. The sun rose, giving rise to another day. The light passing through the window woke him up. Slowly, Estio opened his eyes. He seemed recovered from his previous weakness. He sat up in bed, still groggy from recently waking up. He looked to the side to see Neju. With tearful eyes, she was very happy to see him waking up. She suddenly jumped into Estio's arms, knocking him back onto the bed. As soon as his condition improved, the two left the doctor's infirmary. He asked if he didn't want to stay another day to stabilize better. He said it was enough since he had already been lying down for more than 2 days. They returned home, leaving footprints in the snow. They arrived back at the Ignis Guild. Reporting the success of the mission, they were paid. The senior said he had already produced many talents with his hands, but this was the first time someone returned with a good result in such a short period. Estio asked if he was serious, and he said yes. Also informing Estio, he said that now he had a much higher reputation not only in this city, but also among the nobles of neighboring cities, and even said there were rumors. Estio, curious, asked what rumors they were. The rumors said that an ability user appeared with a unique type of ability. Estio appeared in front of a mansion. Viscount Fabien was the one he was going to meet. He reviewed the details of the mission request. The requester was Viscount Fabien, the details were secret, and the reward was to be discussed in the future. Upon arriving at the mansion's doors, the guards let him in. Entering the mansion, he was warmly received. A little dog named Hiru came running to his feet. Recognizing the little animal, Estio was very happy. Hiru greeted him as it had been a long time since they last met. Then a little girl's voice called for Hiru. Puffing out her cheeks, she asked if he liked Estio more than her. Hiru only barked in response. Disheartened, she said she still couldn't win against Estio. Then she asked why he was there. Seeing an envelope in his hand, she realized that her father had called him there. She said it was great to see him again, and agreeing, Estio only said yes, making her ask what he thought. Confused, Estio said it was not bad, but this response made her curious. If not bad meant good or bad as she pinched his cheeks. Curiously, Estio asks if she isn't worried that he might read someone else's heart. Without thinking, she says she isn't worried. He adds that he could discover secrets she doesn't want to reveal to others.